From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. "185 Venezuelans have returned home from Brazil. They're part of the Back to the Homeland plan promoted by the government to bring migrants back to the country."
The first thing you find when you enter Roraima, in Brazil, are tents provided to Venezuelan migrants by the army, and a parent welcome sign.
We received all the documentation needed. We were offered a job, a house, many other things, and we were told the situation was very good in Brazil. But when we arrived, the job was cutting trees, doing a lot of things that we're not used to. I'm a professional, a very good professional.
The reality Venezuelan migrants found when they arrived to Roraima's capital, Boa Vista, was very different to the one they were told.
It's not easy to get a job. If you find a job, you are paid less. It is a mess. You are humiliated and mistreated. You left your country believing what people said, that there are jobs, that everything is good and easy, and it's not like that.
They return to their homeland feeling down, feeling they have missed something in their souls.
It was a traumatic experience. All doors were closed. We faced mistreatment. There are no jobs. Anyways, I was a mechanic in Venezuela before leaving. In Brazil, I have lived in the streets. In Venezuela, I was at home.
Most of them come from a humble background and left due to the economic situation, but they found a worse scenario on the other side of the border.
I was told a different story about Boa Vista. When you get there, you see the reality is quite tough. There is a lot of suffering, hunger. I have never been hungry in Venezuela. You can eat yuca, fish, whatever. Living to another country, I wouldn't advise it to anyone.
Things were very different when we arrived there, but then things changed. We were mistreated, we were asked what were we doing there, we didn't have proper access to water, not even for having a shower. We were also hit.
They believe in the solidarity promoted by the Brazilian government.
There's a lot of manipulation on the migration issue. People leave and then many of them regret it. Many are still in Brazil and they want to return, but they cannot find a way. They're sleeping in the streets. I know a person who was sleeping in the streets and he almost got burned by a Brazilian crowd. I was so afraid.
Some warm migration has also become a big business.
They have money assigned for Venezuelans. The more Venezuelans, the more money United Nations gives them. But the help doesn't arrive to us. We make our own tents and then we are forced to remove them because UN observers arrive.
Luckily, they are back to Venezuela.
I would like to welcome you back to your country, to Simón Bolívar's homeland.
These 185 migrants are home again. Around 1,230 Venezuelans have returned from Brazil thanks to the Back to the Homeland program.
Argentina's President Mauricio Macri will cut up to 10 ministries in his cabinet. The Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Labor will disappear in this government reshaping. Critics said Macri is eliminating the main ministries in charge of social policies. Meanwhile, the country's currency continues to plummet. The peso fell 34% in relation to the US dollar in the month of August alone. Over 500 state workers from the agro-industrial sector have been fired. The decision came as austerity measures are promoted by the government. Workers have protested the decision by campaigning outside of the Ministry of Agro-Industry's headquarters.
The layoffs are especially tough in economic deprived provinces. Units will be dismantled in the Patagonia and also in different provinces across the northeast region of the country. With all the anguish and sadness of the 560 layoffs are confirmed, our Workers' Assembly ratifies our occupation in the ministry.
Still in Argentina, former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner will again appear in court on Monday. Judge Claudio Bonadio wants Fernández to give her testimony on the alleged corruption network during her term. So far, 12 businessmen and high officials linked to the case have been arrested. Fernández has denied any wrongdoing. She has also denounced this as a political persecution campaign targeting her. Protests have sparked in Guatemala after President Jimmy Morales expelled the International Commission Against Impunity. We have more details on this report.
people gather once again in the central square of Guatemala City to protest against President Jimmy Morales. This time, they are rejecting the president's decision to expel the International Commission against impunity from the country. Just before, this UN mission had requested Morales loses his immunity in order to investigate him. He is accused of illegal campaign financing.
His decision is proving once again he is corrupt and a thief. If he wants the International Commission Against Impunity out, it's because he's afraid. He's afraid of what the investigation has found so far.
The country is currently facing a new political crisis. Demonstrators said this has been fueled by Morales' rejection to be fully investigated. They also denounced the government used military personnel to announce the expulsion. They say they remember the dictatorship.
We are showing him we are not afraid of the military. They will not intimidate us. The president can send all the military personnel he wants. We will remain here demanding he leaves.
The Constitutional Court has received a request from the human rights prosecutor to prevent the president from using the military during this time.
We are asking the Constitutional Court to forbid President Morales to mobilize the military. This request also includes the Ministry of Government and the police.
People have called for new protests against President Jimmy Morales. Meanwhile, the Constitutional Court will have to decide on another legal action to prevent the International Commission Against Impunity to leave the country.
Sweden's Foreign Minister Margot Wallström says her country will do everything to ensure the UN mission remains in the country. Wallström says the decision made by President Jimmy Morales is very worrying, as the Commission is aimed to guarantee the rule of law. Guatemala has tried to expel the Swedish ambassador since May after he criticized corruption in the country. Thousands of supporters of Nicaragua's President Daniel Ortega have marched in the capital Managua. People are calling for justice for those killed during demonstrations. They accuse the opposition of provoking this violence. The rally has come a day after the United Nations Human Rights Mission left the country. The government says everything has returned to normal after 5 months of political crisis. At least 265 people have died during protests, according to the Commission for the Truth and Peace and Justice.
As Sandinistas, we are commemorating and we are following the legacy that our commander, President Daniel Ortega, is offering to all Nicaraguans. This is giving us health and education. It is giving us everything, a peaceful country, a free country.
Anti-government demonstrators have also marched in Managua. Violent acts were registered and 2 people have been injured. Various cars were burned and different roads blocked. Meanwhile, the government announced a 5.20% increase in the average minimum wage. The government had decreed the hike in March before the political crisis started in mid-April. People are hopeful the country's economy will recover. We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute.
Zapytujemy, kiedy pan minister opracuje normy zanieczyszczeń dla środowiska odnośnie zanieczyszczeń kazanych.
Ja chcę czyste powietrze, żeby nie śmierdziało, żeby moja wnusia żyła w czystym powietrzu, zdrowo, tak? Żeby mogła żyć naprawdę zgodnie z przyrodą.
Telesur Documentaries presents Big Business, negligent conditions behind the food industry and the indifference of authorities. Today, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Brazil's vice presidential candidate Fernando Haddad says his party will defend former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva's presidential candidacy. Haddad says the Workers' Party is the only one defending the people's will.
We will do whatever it takes to continue with the presidential run despite the ban. We will guarantee a project that respects popular sovereignty, national sovereignty. We will meet with our allies and give a proper answer to this matter.
Mexico's Congress is starting a new term. Newly elected lawmakers have celebrated their first ordinary session. They had received the last report, but the outgoing government and held a discussion. Andrés Manuel López Obrador has a great majority in Congress. His Morena party has 247 seats in the lower house and 58 in Senate.
We are starting a different regime based on the tireless search for consensus because we want to give the country a higher level of plural coexistence.
Colombia's National Liberation Army, or ELN, has said it is ready to release the 9 kidnapped police and military personnel. The armed group has delivered a protocol to Iván Duque's government to proceed with the release. It has also demanded international observers be present in the exchange. The ELN proposed Cuba and Norway as third parties, since they have accompanied Colombia's peace process. The government insists the group must end all violence and criminal activities to continue the negotiations. High Commissioner for Peace, Miguel Ceballos, has asked the ELN to release all of those who have been kidnapped. The government says the ELN has 19 people kidnapped.
When the president referred to kidnappings, he said a very important word. He said all of those kidnapped, meaning not just the 9 kidnapped last month, but all of those who have been kidnapped should be freed.
The Revolutionary Alternative Forces of the Commons Party are meeting during the weekend. Their members are evaluating how to fulfill the peace process signed in 2016.
Security is the main concern, debated in the Revolutionary Alternative Forces of the Commons second plenary session. This was the main reason for many members not to attend. But despite fears, the session has a high participation.
We are going to analyze the path we have made, what we have done right, which mistakes we have committed, and how we plan the future. We will debate the next electoral campaign and how we are going to face the current government and its decision. We are also going to discuss how to fully implement the Havana Peace Accords.
They are also urging about the information provided to the media about the disappearances of FARC leaders Iván Márquez and John Moreno.
We need to defeat the enemies of the peace process and avoid tactics such as extradition. Some army operations have put the process at risk. I make a call for the rights of former combatants to be respected, so they can be reintegrated to society. They should have their political and security rights guaranteed.
Some people say Márquez and Moreno are following the law and that details about their situation will be revealed at the right time.
The important thing is that they appear in court when they are called by the Special Jurisdiction for Peace.
At least 72 former combatants have been killed during the reincorporation process. Members have faced insecurity and the lack of guarantees in the legal process. Despite this, the FARC party has insisted it will fight for peace.
Representatives of 1,000 Latin American countries are meeting on Monday to discuss migration coming from Venezuela. Ecuador made a call in an attempt to find regional solutions to this migration flow. Representatives from Argentina, Brazil, Costa Rica, Colombia, Chile, Mexico, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Bolivia, and Uruguay will attend the meeting. Workers in Ecuador have protested against the new economic measures announced by the government. They said President Lenín Moreno didn't comply with their demands.
Members of the popular and solidarity economy sector gathered in the park Arbolito in the center of Quito. Several workers arrived from different provinces of Ecuador with banners and music. They made public their demands and disagreements against several policies implemented by the Ecuadorian authorities. One of their disagreements is the bill of the public procurement organic law presented by the Assemblyman Henry Cucalón.
All the organizations of the popular and solidarity economy are together with a single purpose, that the law of public procurement be respected where all the figures of the popular and solidarity economy are immersed.
The members argue they feel affected by the government's decisions, saying that their incomes have been reduced. They also claim they cannot compete against big companies in light of the new legislation.
We are here to defend the rights of the popular and solidarity economy and not allow them to once again violate what we have achieved with great effort.
In one of its latest messages, the government has announced that 1.3 million in productive credits will be financed to activate economic growth, benefiting micro and small businesses and the popular and solidarity economy. However, several sectors claim that President Lenin Moreno didn't comply with any of the economic proposals.
It is one of the announcements of millionaire injections for the promotion of the popular and solidarity economy. However, those credits or that money, it has not arrived. And if it does, it comes with 25 to 28% interest, which is cruel for this type of developing economy, which is a popular and solidarity economy.
The workers expected to meet with President Lenin Moreno to discuss the popular and solidarity economy rights, but they had no response. They therefore announced that they will continue with the struggle until their demands are heard. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
Experts have arrived in Colombia to discuss the effects of fracking in the region. Our correspondent has the details in this report.
Experts from Chile, Argentina, and Brazil have arrived in Colombia to talk about the fight against fracking in South America. They say that hydrocarbon extraction method affects people's health and has severe impact on the environment.
Sometimes economic interests come before social interests and human rights. This breaks state stability and its economic needs and development. They also don't respect the rights of indigenous communities, which are vital for society.
Experts have explained that fracking affects many miles of land. With each one of these perforations, between 9 and 29 million liters of water can turn highly toxic. They also destroy the ecosystem and affect people's hearts, breathing systems, and more.
Scientific studies have proven that fracking affects people's quality of life. It also reduces the quality of water. There is also a risk of earthquakes happening.
Different communities in Colombia are defending their land from this activity. They presented a bill to Congress to ban the exploitation of their territories.
What we and some members of Congress that support the bill are giving is an example that the rest of Latin America and the world must follow. This is a real way to protect the environment.
Through their experience, several organizations are fighting for the environment, Asian cultures and lands, and humanitarian rights. They want to overcome the challenges that fracking brings to the region.
Bolivian President Evo Morales said the country has submitted a counter-memorial to a lawsuit filed by Chile. This relates to a decade-old dispute over whether Chile has the right to use a river that crosses their shared border. Our correspondent Freddy Morales has more from La Paz.
Bolivia has petitioned the International Court to force Chile to grant Bolivia direct access to the Pacific Ocean. It's a dispute that dates back decades. Also, back in 2016, Chile made the same legal bid. Now Bolivia wants a corridor to the sea to boost its exports of natural gas and minerals. Chile argues Bolivia already has access on favorable terms. Both countries have legal petitions before the courts. Judges will deliberate for several months before setting the date for a ruling.
That was Freddy Morales from Bolivia. Thousands of people were murdered and disappeared in Peru between 1980 and 2000. Now their relatives are remembering and honoring them with a memorial site.
They only have this space called El Ojo que Llora, or the eye that cries, to remember their murdered and disappeared relatives by subversives or the military between 1980 and 2000. Out of the more than 21,000 missing Peruvians, the prosecutor's office only found about 3,000 bodies, of which less than half were identified and returned to their families.
We ask the armed forces to be decent and speak. They were their countrymen who they disappeared. So this is why we ask in the name of their families, the mothers, the brothers, the parents, to tell us what happened to them. Did they throw them in the river? Did they burn them? We just want to know.
Another pending issue is the collective reparation for the affected communities because of the violence. 15 years ago, the Truth Commission recommended assisting with productive social programs and basic services. But out of 5,700 registered communities, only 46% have received partial assistance, according to the Ministry of Justice.
We still have a long way to go with the issue of reparations. We know that we do, and that we have not fulfilled many of the expectations of the people who have suffered from the violence. However, the state's commitment is to advance and to attend to the most people possible.
The lack of a budget for the reparation programs and the propaganda campaigns of Fujimorismo are, according to experts, the reason for the limited progress for justice and reparation for hundreds of thousands of affected people, while the little that is done is due to pressure from victims' associations and human rights associations.
It is only because there are these organizations that permanently pressurize the government to resolve this and find justice. But we are always saying that the most affected have been ignored. The excluded, the poor, and the political parties do not have this in their agenda.
According to human rights organizations, out of the more than 5,000 women victims of sexual violence during the internal violence, only 3 people have been punished, while the thousands of women sterilized by force by the Fujimori dictatorship have been waiting 20 years for justice.
We'll take a short break now. World News are next.
The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. At least 6 people have been killed in a suicide bombing at a local government office building in Somalia. 14 people were injured, including 6 children from a nearby school. The blast also blew off the roof of a mosque and damaged several homes. The armed group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack. Somalia has faced instability and violence since 1991, when the military government was overthrown.
We were in the middle of our usual work when the bomb happened in front of our district office. Our building was destroyed. I hid under the table. There was a lot of gunfire at our gate. Someone called me to check if we were safe, but when I came out, I saw many people laying on the ground injured, while others were dead.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has met with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa ahead of the China-Africa Cooperation Summit. Xi Jinping said the two countries have been benefiting from more than 2 decades since the establishment of diplomatic ties. Ramaphosa said South Africa will learn from China's experience in political and economical development. Presidents and heads of state across Africa have arrived in Beijing for the summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Chinese President Xi Jinping has met with several African leaders to discuss international and regional issues. The summit will promote diplomatic, economic, and bilateral relations between both partners. The forum will begin on September 3rd. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has expressed his support to the China-Africa Cooperation Summit.
South-South cooperation is more important in today's world. This will not replace the North-South cooperation in the sense that countries of the North have responsibilities that were assumed in relation to support the development of the developing countries. But the South-South cooperation is a fundamental tool to allow, in this case, African countries to benefit of what has been the remarkable success of Chinese economic development in the past decades. The cooperation between China and Africa is an absolute vital instrument for Africa's development.
Now let's take a look at some other stories making headlines around the world.
Demonstrators have blocked main roads in several Yemeni cities to protest against the fall of the local currency and the rising food and fuel prices. The Yemeni rial has lost more than half its value against the US dollar since the start of the civil war in 2015.
The dollar is too expensive. How can people live? How can they eat? My salary is 50,000 rial per month. It is only sufficient to meet my needs for 10 days.
Thousands of people in Moscow have rallied against the government plan to increase the retirement age from 60 to 65 years for men by 2028 and from 55 to 63 for women by 2034. Demonstrators carried red flags and banners belonging to the Communist Party, the main organizer of the protest. Hundreds of Palestinian refugees gathered in front of the headquarters of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency in Jordan. They have protested a decision by the U.S. to end its decades of funding for the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. About 370,000 refugees living in camps in Jordan depend on the aid that came from the U.S. Relief Agency.
We come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories you can find on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.